Story disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction and is intended for entertainment purposes only. The content includes dark themes, horror elements, and fictional depictions of rituals and sacrifices that are purely imaginative and not reflective of any real-life practices or beliefs. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is not suitable for younger audiences, and parental guidance is recommended. The story does not endorse or promote any harmful behavior, violence, or dangerous activities. Please note that all characters, events, and settings are entirely fictional and created for the purpose of storytelling. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. In this gripping second episode, Amina's journey takes a dark twist. Her friend Amira has vanished, and only whispers of a hidden gate, the gateway to the realm of the forgotten, offer any hope of understanding. But this gate isn't just a passage, it's a trap bound by blood, by sacrifice, and those who seek it risk losing themselves to darkness forever. With time slipping away and dark magic tightening its grip, Amina races against fate, her every step bringing her closer to a confrontation with forces she's only begun to understand. Will she save her friend, or be claimed by the shadows herself? The days dragged on as Amina grew more determined to uncover the truth behind the ancient magic. Every night, she spent hours scouring old texts, hidden libraries, and whispered secrets. The city held stories of old tales of forgotten gods and powers that predated even the first settlement of the land. She needed answers, and soon. It was during one of these restless nights that she discovered something crucial. A legend about a hidden gate, one that was said to connect the living world to the realm of the forgotten. This gate, if found, could unlock unimaginable power, but it came with a cost. Those who sought it out would be bound to the darkness forever. As Amina read the ancient scroll, her heart raced. The gate was said to be hidden beneath the city, buried deep where the foundations of the first settlements were built. But the path to it wasn't clear. It was said that only those marked by fate, those who understood the ancient magic, could find it. And Amina realized with a sinking feeling that Zara had likely found it already. "Amira, we need to leave," Amina whispered into the quiet, hoping her friend was still asleep. But she knew she was wrong, the stillness was telling. Amira had been more distant than ever, and Amina feared the worst. She moved to Amira's room, her heart heavy. But when she opened the door, the room was empty. The bed was untouched, and a cold shiver ran down Amina's spine. It wasn't just that Amira had left without a word, it was the ominous feeling that accompanied her absence. Amina's instincts kicked in. She knew that Amira was somehow connected to the dark forces that Zara had awakened, and she couldn't risk losing her friend to them. With a deep breath, Amina grabbed her coat and set out into the city. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to find the hidden gate before Zara did. The streets were eerie at this hour, the city lying in a disturbed silence, as though holding its breath. The lights flickered overhead as Amina moved through the narrow alleyways, avoiding the main roads where Zara's followers roamed. She followed the path she had learned from the old texts, deep into the heart of the city. The energy around her grew thick with an unsettling presence. There, in the distance, was a crumbling stone wall, covered in ivy and centuries of dust. It looked like it had been forgotten by time, but Amina knew this was the place, the forgotten gate. She approached cautiously, the air heavy with dark magic, her heart racing in anticipation. She touched the wall, feeling the pulse of ancient power beneath her fingers. She could sense the gate was real, but it wasn't unlocked yet. The scroll had warned of the price. The gate could only be opened by blood, by sacrifice. Amina swallowed hard, knowing what she had to do. As she prepared to summon the magic, the shadows around her began to shift, and Zara's voice echoed through the air, cold and menacing. "You thought you could stop me, didn't you, Amina?" Zara's laughter was the last thing Amina heard before the darkness descended. Amina awoke to find herself lying on the cold stone floor, her head spinning. She felt the weight of something heavy around her neck, an amulet of dark metal that seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. Zara stood over her, watching with a smirk on her face. "You were never meant to stop me, Amina," Zara said, her voice laced with dark satisfaction. "You've played right into my hands." Amina struggled to her feet, the sharp pain in her head a reminder of how close Zara had come to breaking her. The dark amulet around her neck burned against her skin, but she couldn't take it off. It was like it was fused to her, part of the dark magic that Zara had been manipulating all along. "Where is Amira?" Amina demanded, her voice thick with both fear and defiance. Zara's smirk widened. "You're too late. She's already mine." Amina felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The feeling of betrayal had been there for days, but now it was a living thing. Amira had fallen under Zara's sway, her friend now a puppet to the dark magic Zara controlled. Amina's heart pounded as she looked around, trying to find a way out. Zara's magic was far stronger than she had anticipated, and the city was thick with its influence. But there had to be a way. Amina wasn't going to lose Amira to the darkness. Not without a fight. "You won't get away with this," Amina spat, her eyes narrowing as she focused all her energy into the dark amulet around her neck. If Zara could use dark magic, so could she. She just had to learn how. "You think you have a choice?" Zara laughed again, this time louder and more sinister. "You can't stop what's already begun. But I will give you a choice. Join me, and I'll spare you." Amina stared at Zara, her mind racing. She knew what Zara was offering, a false sense of power, one that would eventually destroy her. But she also knew that if she didn't act quickly, she would lose Amira forever. In the distance, Amina could hear the faintest whisper, like a voice calling her name. It was Amira, lost in the darkness, still fighting to break free. Amina felt the pull of Amira's voice, faint but unmistakable. The urge to save her friend overcame the darkness closing in around her. She took a deep breath, shaking off the dizziness from the dark amulet, then focused all her energy on the one thing she couldn't lose, Amira. "You won't win, Zara," Amina said, her voice stronger than before, despite the terror creeping in her heart. "I'll never join you. Not now, not ever." Zara's smile faded slightly, her eyes narrowing. "You still don't understand, do you?" she hissed. "This power, this magic, it's not something you can control. It controls you. And soon, you'll see that I'm not the only one who's bound to it." As Zara's words lingered in the air, a chilling wind swept through the room, twisting the shadows in every corner. The walls seemed to come alive, shifting and groaning as if the entire city was being pulled into the dark magic that had long been hidden beneath it. Amina's heart pounded in her chest. She needed to act quickly. Zara was powerful, yes, but Amina had something Zara didn't. She had the will to fight, and she knew she had a limited window of time before the darkness swallowed everything whole. With a flick of her wrist, Amina called on the magic that had been awakened in her. It was faint, like a flicker of a dying flame, but she pushed harder, willing it to grow. The air around her crackled with energy, and the dark amulet at her neck seemed to pulse in response. Zara looked at her with a mixture of amusement and irritation. "You really think that little magic is going to stop me?" "No," Amina whispered, her voice trembling with a power she hadn't yet fully tapped. "But it will give me the time I need." As the amulet's power began to resonate with the magic inside her, the walls of the room seemed to bend. Amina's vision blurred, and she felt herself being pulled toward the shadows. For a moment, she thought she was losing control, but the faint voice of Amira called out again, clearer this time. "Amina, help me." That was all Amina needed. With a sudden surge of strength, she reached into the depths of her magic, summoning the dark forces to her aid. The room shuddered, and the shadows retreated. For just a moment, Zara's confident expression faltered. "This isn't over," Zara spat, her voice like poison. "But you'll never win, Amina. You're too weak." Amina ignored her. She could feel Amira's presence growing stronger, almost like a beacon in the darkness. She knew where to go. With a final, determined breath, Amina turned on her heel and dashed through the crumbling walls, the air thick with shadows. She couldn't wait any longer. Amira was closer than she'd ever been before. Amina ran through the dark streets of the city, the ancient magic flowing through her veins. Her heart raced with each step, her mind only focused on the faint, desperate cries of her friend. She had never felt power like this before, dark and twisted, yet familiar. It was as if the city itself had been waiting for her to find it, to unlock its secrets. But she couldn't let herself get distracted. Amira was still out there, trapped in the darkness Zara had unleashed. After what felt like an eternity of winding through hidden alleyways, Amina arrived at the forgotten building. Its architecture was ancient, overgrown with vines and debris, a relic from a time long past. But this building was more than just old. It was alive with magic. The air hummed with an eerie energy, and as Amina stepped closer, she could feel the darkness seeping out of the cracks in the walls. She reached for the door, but before she could touch the handle, her loud, mocking laugh echoed from within. "Do you really think you can save her, Amina?" Zara's voice was low and dripping with venom. Amina's hand trembled for a moment, but she forced herself to step forward. "I'm not leaving without her." Inside, the room was vast and filled with shadows. The only source of light came from an old, flickering candle that sat atop a pedestal in the center of the room. Amira was there, standing motionless, her eyes glazed over in a trance-like state. Zara stood beside her, a wicked smile playing on her lips. "You've come too late. She's already mine." Amina's breath caught in her throat as she moved closer to Amira. The darkness pressed against her, trying to force her back. But she couldn't give up now. She had to save her friend. "What have you done to her?" Amina demanded, her voice shaking but filled with determination. Zara laughed cruelly. "She belongs to the magic now. She made her choice." Amina's heart sank. But as her eyes met Amira's, she saw the faintest flicker of recognition in her friend's gaze. She wasn't entirely lost yet. There was still hope. With a surge of power, Amina reached for her friend's hand, her fingers brushing Amira's cold skin. The dark magic surged around her, threatening to pull her in, but Amina held firm. She was stronger than Zara had anticipated. "I won't let you take her," Amina whispered, her voice steady despite the danger surrounding her. "I'll save her from this." Zara's expression twisted into a snarl. "You can't stop this. It's too late." But Amina wasn't listening anymore. She chanted the incantation she had read earlier, a surge of ancient power flowing through her. The darkness around them started to recede, pushing back as the magic of the forgotten gate began to fade. Amira's eyes fluttered, and she shook her head as though waking from a deep sleep. The trance began to break, and Zara's hold on her weakened. "No, no." Zara screamed as her own power began to unravel. "This can't be happening." But it was. Amira was free. The air was thick with the remnants of the dark magic Zara had summoned. The building, once alive with energy, now felt like a hollow shell. Amira stumbled back, blinking as she looked around in confusion. "Amina," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I'm here," Amina said, rushing to her side. "I've got you." For a moment, Amira seemed disoriented, as if the darkness had left her physically weak. She clutched Amina's arm, her breathing ragged. "Zara, she's gone," Amina interrupted, her voice low but firm. "We've beaten her." But Amina knew this wasn't over. Zara was powerful, and there were consequences to everything they had done. The dark forces they had encountered weren't just going to fade away so easily. "We have to leave," Amina said, pulling Amira along as they stumbled through the crumbling building. Outside, the city felt different, heavier, darker, as though the shadows had taken root. The ancient magic had left a scar on the land, and Amina knew that they had only just begun to understand the full price of their actions. Amira looked at Amina with wide, scared eyes. "What now?" Amina gazed up at the sky. It was dark, the cloud swirling like a storm was about to break. "Now we make sure we never let this happen again." But deep down, Amina knew that the darkness would always be lurking, waiting for the right moment to return. The city felt colder now, even under the muted light of the waning moon. Amina and Amira stumbled through the streets, their hearts heavy with the weight of their victory. Zara was defeated, for now, but Amina could feel the ripples of the dark magic still lingering in the air. It was as if the earth itself had absorbed the curse and refused to let it go. Amira was still shaking, her hands trembling as she clutched Amina's arm for support. Her eyes were filled with a mix of fear and confusion, as if she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "I don't understand," Amira whispered. I was lost in it. The darkness took me. And now it's like nothing's real anymore." Amina stopped and turned to her. "It's real, Amira. You're here. You're safe." But even as she spoke, Amina couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Zara might be gone, but something had changed. The world felt different now, as if the balance had shifted, and the dark forces they had unleashed were still stirring beneath the surface. "We need to find answers," Amina said, her voice low and resolute. Zara wasn't the only one tied to this magic. "There's something bigger going on here. We've only scratched the surface." Amira looked at her, her face pale and drawn. But what if Zara wasn't the last one? What if there are others like her? Amina felt a cold chill run down her spine. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." The wind shifted, carrying with it a whisper of something ancient, a warning. Amina and Amira exchanged a glance, knowing deep in their hearts that they had merely uncovered the first layer of a much darker truth. The shadows that had plagued them were far from finished. Amina and Amira arrived at Amina's home, a small but cozy apartment on the edge of the city. The night was thick with uncertainty, and the moonlight barely filtered through the grimy windows. They collapsed onto the couch, exhausted from their ordeal but far from at peace. Amina's mind was racing. The magic they had encountered, the ancient powers that had been unleashed, were far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Zara had been a pawn in a much larger game, one that neither of them fully understood. As Amira slept, Amina sat up, staring at the dark book that had started it all. It was lying on the coffee table, its pages worn and heavy with secrets. The Book of Shadows. Amina had tried to make sense of it earlier, but it was a puzzle that refused to be solved. She opened the book again, the ink-heavy symbols appearing like foreign whispers. As she scanned the pages, she felt the air grow thick around her, as if the book itself was alive, reacting to her presence. Something was calling to her. Her fingers traced the ancient symbols as if they held the key to all the answers. And then, in the corner of the page, she saw it. A name. The name of the person who had first written the book. Zara's ancestor. Zara wasn't just a wielder of dark magic, Amina whispered to herself. She was a descendant of the original sorcerers who created this curse. The revelation hit her like a ton of bricks. Zara's thirst for power was part of a bloodline. And if Zara had been so dangerous, how much worse were the other descendants of that lineage? Suddenly, Amina's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You've only awakened the first of many. The darkness will never be satisfied." You've made a dangerous enemy. The message was simple, but it sent a shockwave through Amina's body. Her grip tightened on the book, the shadows in the room growing darker around her. Amira stirred from the couch, groggily sitting up. What's wrong? Amina looked up at her, her heart pounding. It's not over. We've only just begun. The city was alive with secrets, and Amina had the sinking feeling that she had only uncovered the surface. The curse that had been unleashed on Zara's family wasn't isolated. It was part of something bigger, something ancient and far more dangerous. Over the following days, Amina and Amira tried to piece together the history behind Zara's bloodline. The more they dug, the more they realized the scope of the darkness that had been passed down through generations. Each descendant had fallen to the curse, one after the other, sacrificing their humanity for power. But what terrified Amina the most was the thought that Zara wasn't the only one. There were other descendants out there, each with their own piece of dark magic, each with their own desire for power. Amina sat at her desk, flipping through the pages of the Book of Shadows. The symbols on the page began to blur in front of her, as if the book was trying to resist her touch. But she needed answers, she couldn't stop now. Her eyes fell on another name, one she hadn't seen before. It was scrawled in a jagged, hurried script that looked like it had been written in blood. The Watcher. Amina's heart skipped a beat. This was different from the other names in the book. The Watcher wasn't a descendant of the cursed sorcerers. The Watcher was something else entirely. Suddenly, the room grew colder, and Amina's phone buzzed again. It was the same unknown number. You've been warned. The Watcher is coming. You can't stop what you've started. Amina's breath hitched. She had no idea what the Watcher was or why they were coming, but one thing was certain. They weren't done yet. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes as the city lay in a restless, uneasy silence. Amina sat still, her body tense with anticipation. The Watcher was coming, but who, or what, was this mysterious figure that had been whispered about in the pages of the Book of Shadows? She felt like a pawn in a larger game, one whose rules were written in ancient blood and forgotten by time. Amira had gone home, but Amina couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally across the room, and every creak of the floorboards felt like a prelude to something dark and dangerous. Amina stood and moved to the window, peering out into the alley below. The streets were quiet, too quiet, like the calm before a storm. Her phone buzzed again. It was the same unknown number. The Watcher will find you. The darkness cannot be escaped. The message sent a chill down Amina's spine. Whoever this Watcher was, they had a power beyond anything she had encountered before. The curse was spreading like wildfire, and Amina knew that it was only a matter of time before the Watcher found her. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Amina's heart skipped. She had expected this, but that didn't make it any easier. With trembling hands, she approached the door and peeked through the peephole. There was no one there. Just the shadows. But then, a voice echoed through the silence. A voice as cold as ice. Amina. She felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. It wasn't a human voice, it was a whisper, dark and distant, like the sound of something buried deep underground. Slowly, she backed away from the door, her eyes darting around the room for any sign of movement. The shadows were closing in on her. The voice came again, louder this time, but it wasn't coming from outside the door. It was coming from behind her. Amina, come with me. She spun around, and there, standing in the corner of the room, was a figure. It was barely more than a silhouette, tall, cloaked in darkness, with no discernible features. Its eyes were two glows of red light, and the air around it seemed to crackle with an unearthly energy. The Watcher. Amina's heart pounded in her chest as the figure stepped forward. She couldn't move, frozen in place by an overwhelming sense of dread. The watcher raised a hand, and the room seemed to bend and twist around him. "You cannot run from your fate," the watcher said, his voice a deep growl that seemed to reverberate in her bones. "The magic you've unleashed cannot be controlled. You are part of the curse now, whether you accept it or not." Amina's hands clenched into fists. She couldn't afford to be afraid, not now, not when the fate of everyone she loved was at stake. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice shaking but firm. The watcher didn't answer. Instead, he extended his hand toward her, and the shadows moved to swallow her whole. But before they could reach her, the door burst open, and Amira appeared, breathless and wide-eyed. "Amina, get out of there." But it was too late. The watcher's shadows had already closed in on Amina, and the room around her began to disappear, fading into a realm of darkness. Amina fell, her body tumbling through the shadows like she was being dragged into a pit. There was no light, no sound, only a suffocating darkness that pressed in on all sides. She couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, like she was drowning in it. Suddenly, her body slammed into the ground, and she gasped for air. She was no longer in her apartment, but somewhere else, somewhere cold and alien. The world around her was dark and twisted, like a place between worlds. Flickers of red and violet light moved in the distance, casting long, jagged shadows on the walls of this underground realm. Amina looked around, trying to get her bearings. She was in a place that felt ancient, as if it had been abandoned for centuries. The ground beneath her feet was cold stone, and the walls were lined with strange symbols that seemed to pulse and write like they were alive. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood up, her eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. She was not alone. In the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, tall, with dark hair and a cloak that shimmered with a strange, otherworldly light. Her face was obscured, but Amina could feel her presence like a weight in the air. "You've come," the woman said, her voice calm and commanding. "But you are not prepared for what lies ahead." Amina's mind raced. This was the Watcher's realm, wasn't it? A place where time and space had no meaning, where the curses of old took on life of their own. "What is this place?" Amina demanded, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her. The woman stepped closer, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "This is the realm of the forgotten," she said, her voice like a whisper on the wind. "Where the curses of old take root and the souls of the damned are kept. You, Amina, are a part of it now." The woman's words struck like a hammer. The darkness, the curse, was far from over. It was only just beginning. Amina's heart hammered in her chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The woman who stood before her seemed like an apparition, her presence heavy with the weight of centuries, but Amina knew she had to find the courage to face whatever this realm had to offer. This was no ordinary dream, it was a nightmare, and she was the star. "What do you mean I'm part of this?" Amina asked, trying to steady her voice. She felt the power of the curse wrap around her like a thick, suffocating chain, but she fought to remain strong. The woman in the cloak tilted her head, as though considering Amina's question. She moved closer, her steps echoing in the eerie silence of the forgotten realm. "You were chosen long before you were born, Amina," the woman said, her voice cold as the stone beneath their feet. "Your bloodline carries the curse, and now, it's your turn to pay the price. The Watcher has watched you for years. And now, it's your time to face him." Amina's mind reeled. She felt like the floor beneath her was shifting, pulling her deeper into this sinister place. "I don't understand." "Why me?" The woman's lips curled into a smile, though her eyes remained dark and void-like. "Because you are not just anyone. You are the key. The Book of Shadows chose you, and now, it's up to you to end the curse, or embrace it." The air around Amina grew heavy with tension. Shadows moved in the corner of her vision, constantly shifting and curling like hungry serpents. She knew the Watcher was near, that it was waiting for her to make a choice. "I won't embrace this," Amina said, her voice firm. "I'll find a way to destroy it." The woman's smile widened, but there was no joy in it. "Destroy it? It has already taken root, Amina. You are the only one who can stop it now. But the Watcher will test you, as he tests all who come here. Are you ready for what's to come?" Before Amina could respond, the shadows around her thickened, forming a wall that seemed to close in. The woman began to fade into the darkness, leaving Amina standing alone in the forgotten realm, surrounded by an eerie silence. But it wasn't a peaceful silence. No, it was the kind of silence that spoke of danger lurking in every corner. The shadows twisted and stretched, and Amina felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes upon her. She could hear faint whispers in the darkness, voices of those who had come before her, people who had tried to escape the curse, then failed. "I have to leave," Amina whispered to herself, but there was no exit. No door, no light, just endless shadows. The curse had her, and there was no turning back now. Hours passed, though time itself seemed meaningless in the forgotten realm. Amina wandered through the endless, twisting paths, each one leading her deeper into the void. There were no landmarks here, no sense of direction. Just the oppressive silence and the ever-present whispers that filled her mind with doubt. "You cannot escape." It was a voice that echoed through the darkness, disembodied and haunting. Amina couldn't tell if it was the Watcher speaking or one of the cursed souls that lingered in this place. Every step she took felt heavier, as if the very air was thickening around her, pulling her down into the earth. And then, she saw them, shadowy figures moving in the distance. Ghostly, translucent shapes that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. They were watching her. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet cracked, and a deep, menacing voice spoke from the darkness. "Amina." Her heart stopped. She spun around, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. There was nothing but the creeping darkness. But the voice was unmistakable. It was the Watcher. "You cannot hide from me," it growled, the voice rising from beneath the earth. "You belong here. You have always belonged here." Amina's pulse quickened. She backed away slowly, every instinct screaming at her to run. But there was no running from this. The Watcher was everywhere, in the shadows, in the air, in the very ground beneath her. Suddenly, from the blackness, two glowing red eyes appeared. They pierced through the darkness like twin torches, staring directly at her. The Watcher stepped forward, its face slowly emerging from the shadows, revealing a twisted, malevolent grin. "You can't escape your fate, Amina." The ground trembled as the Watcher advanced, its shape growing larger, more imposing. The whispers grew louder, the voices of the cursed souls, their pleading echoes filling the air. But Amina wasn't afraid, not now. She had come too far to back down. "I'll find a way to stop you," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. The Watcher's laugh was like a crack of thunder in the realm of shadows. "Stop me. You cannot stop what you do not understand, Amina." With a flash of darkness, the Watcher lunged. The shadows reached out to grab her, pulling her towards the dark void, but Amina fought back, her hands glowing with a sudden surge of power. The curse had awakened something inside her, a power she couldn't explain, but she would use it to survive. As the Watcher's hands neared her, Amina unleashed the full force of her energy. A burst of light exploded from her body, pushing the Watcher back, and for the first time, the darkness around her began to recede. "This is not over," the Watcher. Amina felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest as she stood in the middle of the crumbling ruin, the endless void of shadows around her threatening to consume her once again. The Watcher had retreated, but she knew that this battle wasn't over. It was far from it. Her heart pounded in her ears as she took slow, deliberate steps through the darkened ruins. The cursed realm stretched around her, a twisted mirror of her world, but everything here was wrong. The air was thick with the scent of rot, and every step she took echoed like a funeral dirge. It was as if the earth itself mourned the lost souls trapped here, souls who had come before her, hoping for a way out but finding none. Amina clenched her fists. She was not like them. She refused to be. But as the night stretched on, doubts crept into her mind. The Watcher's words had been clear, you cannot escape. Was that true? Was this place her destiny? Was she really the key to the curse? Every fiber of her being told her to fight, to survive, but the weight of the curse pressed so hard on her shoulders that she felt as though she were walking under the burden of 1,000 lives. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the ruin, lifting the strands of hair from her neck. A familiar voice whispered through the darkness, so faint at first she almost missed it. You must decide now, Amina. It was the voice of the woman in the cloak, the one who had appeared in the Forgotten Realm. She had promised Amina that she could either end the curse or embrace it. Amina stopped dead in her tracks, looking around in confusion. Decide what? She whispered to the empty air, the words catching in her throat. The wind picked up, swirling around her, forming a shadowy figure in the distance. Slowly, the figure moved toward her, materializing into a shape. It was Zara. You've come far, Amina, Zara said, her voice soft but with a chilling edge. She looked the same as before, but there was something different about her now, a darkness that clung to her like a second skin. Amina's body tensed. Zara, she breathed, her eyes narrowing. You've been a part of this from the beginning, haven't you? Zara smiled faintly, but her eyes held a depth of sorrow and malevolence. I have always been a part of it, just as you have, she said. This curse is older than both of us. We were chosen, Amina. We were born to play our parts in this tragedy. Amina's mind raced. She had always known that Zara was dangerous, that there was more to her than met the eye. But to learn that she had been involved in this dark game for so long shook her to the core. You want me to embrace it, Amina said, her voice low, her fists clenched. You want me to give in to the curse? Zara's smile widened. No, Amina. I want you to choose. You either accept the curse or end it. It's your decision now. Amina could feel the shadows in the air closing in, the Watcher's presence lurking in the corners of her vision. She could hear its whispers, calling her to give in, to surrender to the darkness that had long ago taken root in her bloodline. It was as if the walls of the world itself were pressing in on her. But then she thought of her family. She thought of the people she cared about. She thought of all the souls who had been trapped here, forced to become part of the curse. This was her moment. This was the final choice. I will not let the darkness take me, she said, her voice firm. She lifted her hands into the air, calling on the power she had only just begun to understand. The shadows seemed to retreat, but they still clung to her skin like a dark, oppressive mist. Zara's expression remained calm, but there was an unsettling shift in her eyes. You do not understand what you are up against, Amina. The Watcher is older than you think. It has seen countless generations fall to its will. But Amina stood taller, her body crackling with the energy of the curse that she had fought so hard to resist. Then I will be the one to break it, she said. I will not be its puppet. With those words, she raised her arms higher, her fingers glowing with the power she had gained. The shadows trembled and recoiled, the curse beginning to unravel before her eyes. No! Zara cried, reaching out for Amina, but it was too late. A burst of energy erupted from Amina's hands, ripping the shadows apart, burning them away. The darkness that had taken root in this realm began to disintegrate, fading like smoke in the wind. As the last remnants of the curse dissolved, Amina felt herself being lifted from the realm, the ground beneath her feet dissolving into nothing. Zara's form melted into the air, her face twisted with anger and fear. The cursed realm was gone. And with it, the Watcher's grip was finally broken. Amina woke up in her own room, the morning sunlight flooding through the window. The curse was no longer there. The shadows had lifted. She was free. But as she lay there, taking in her surroundings, a cold chill crawled up her spine. "It's not over," she whispered to herself, knowing that the darkness she had faced would always be a part of her. But she had survived. And that was enough.